The story begins with a message I will never forget. Happy belated birthday, Mom. Sorry for the late wish. You should have reminded me. That was all my son, Michael, sent me on my birthday. And the truth is, I didn't receive any birthday wish from him until 3 days later. This wasn't just a simple oversight, it was the neglect of an important day for me. A mother who had poured her heart into caring for and supporting her children. Those words weren't just a late apology, they were a reminder of the many years I had spent doing everything for my family, only to receive nothing but indifference in return. I still remember, when I looked at that message, I had to read it over and over, feeling the coldness slowly seep into my heart. What I felt at that moment wasn't just simple disappointment, it was far worse. It felt as though everything I had done for my children over the years had been in vain. I had sacrificed so much, built habits of giving without ever expecting anything in return. Now, when my son couldn't even remember my birthday, I began to feel like I no longer mattered to them. I wasn't just the mother who brought him into this world, but I had become a mere ATM for the family, someone who could easily be taken advantage of without any respect. I used to be a devoted mother, or rather, a naive one. For many years, I always thought that love was unconditional sacrifice. I believed that if I kept doing this, kept giving, eventually my children would realize the love I had for them. But there's a truth I had to face. I had done all those things without ever receiving true affection in return. No one in my family ever truly saw me as a person. I was just an endless financial resource that they could tap into whenever they needed. So when that message came, everything in me changed. It wasn't just because he forgot my birthday. It was because I realized I had given too much without getting anything worthy back. Sure, when Robert, my late husband, was still alive, things were different. We had built a solid family, and I was always there to support my children. But since he passed away, everything seemed to change, especially with Michael, my son. I can't forget all the times I helped him in the past. When Michael divorced his first wife, I helped him pay for legal fees. When he and Nora got married, I paid for their honeymoon in Italy. Every time they needed money to get by, I was always ready to offer without hesitation. Even when they couldn't afford the down payment for their dream home, I wrote a check for $200,000 without a second thought. But then, after everything I had done for them, when my birthday came around, they couldn't remember. Even my son, whom I had raised all those years, treated me like a stranger, someone who existed only to serve the family's financial needs. This didn't just hurt me, it made me realize that all my sacrifices had become meaningless. This wasn't just a painful moment, it was a turning point in my long journey when I realized I had lived too long in a relationship where I was the only one giving and they were the only ones receiving. I realized I couldn't continue in such a relationship anymore, and I needed to change. That day, I decided I would no longer provide for them financially without receiving the respect I deserved, not just because they forgot my birthday, but because of a series of selfish and disrespectful actions I had endured over the years. And from that moment on, I was no longer the mother who would give everything away. Instead, I would take control of my life, and I would not let anyone take advantage of me again. This decision didn't come easily. It was the result of years of sacrifice and waiting for recognition from my family. But now, I know I cannot continue living like this. I need to stand up and take back control of my life. My life used to be about taking care of my family, providing everything for my children without ever questioning it. I did everything with the belief that a mother's love would be reciprocated with respect and affection from my children. But now, I realize I was wrong. More than once I wondered if I was being taken advantage of, but I always quickly dismissed those doubts. I convinced myself that this was my duty, that love is unconditional sacrifice. I always wanted my children to understand that I would do anything to protect and support them. Now, looking back, I realize I was wrong. I had become a mobile ATM for my family, especially from my son Michael and daughter-in-law Nora. I never said no, never asked for anything for myself. I thought that if I kept giving, my children would eventually recognize my love, and one day they would appreciate me. But reality didn't unfold that way. Although I lived peacefully in the apartment on Park Avenue, where Robert and I had lived together for 30 years, I should be proud of the life I built. But I felt lonely. The Sunday family visits, the times I tried to create a warm atmosphere at holidays, the moments I welcomed them into my home and opened my wallet to help them in any circumstance, all of it was done in silence. I had sacrificed without complaint, but the responses I received were never equal to what I gave. I had nurtured my son for years, but then he forgot my birthday. How long has it been since I last received a genuine check-in from Michael and Nora? I lost precious moments in my life to do everything for them. I financed luxury vacations, paid tuition for my grandchildren, helped them with home loans, even covering Nora's extravagant expenses. But what I got in return was a lack of respect, moments when they only came to me when they needed money. I am not a mother without boundaries. On the contrary, I had hoped that my actions would be repaid with care and love, but the more I gave, the more I felt forgotten. Michael and Nora no longer called me unless they needed something. My grandchildren could only muster polite greetings when I visited. There were no long conversations about life, about changes in the family, only calls for money, requests for financial support. It seemed like I was just an ATM that they could call whenever they needed. As I reflect on the past years, I realize I had been used. The congratulatory phone calls, the dinner invitations, the small gifts were their way of maintaining the relationship, but everything was just to keep the money flowing into their accounts. This had become a routine, not just for me, but for them. They saw me as a means, not a true family member. I once thought that if I kept giving, love would eventually come back to me, but it didn't. The precious moments of my life gradually became meaningless. We were no longer a family in the deep sense of the word. Our relationship was no longer based on true bonding, but just on transactional exchanges. I didn't want to be a mother who was only remembered when financial help was needed. What's sad is that I didn't just do this once or twice. I did it over a long period of time. Every time my son needed money, every time the family needed support, I was there, and I felt they would always be my family, always see me as an indispensable part. But now I realize they only saw me as a financial resource. So when my son forgot my birthday and sent a detached text, I realized it was time for a change. I had sacrificed for too long without receiving any care from them. I couldn't keep living this way. And that's when I decided I would no longer provide financial support, not just because of a forgotten birthday, but because of a long-standing lack of respect that made me feel like I no longer had value in the family. I had grown so used to giving without asking for anything, but this event was the last straw. It was time to stop, not just because of the disrespect toward my birthday, but because of the lack of respect throughout my life. They no longer saw me as a real mother, but only as a financial tool. And I decided I would not let myself be used any longer. Since I decided to stop providing financial support for Michael and Nora, I've felt a profound shift within myself. For the first time in many years, I felt powerful. For the first time, I wasn't the one carrying the burden. I was the one making the decisions. I was no longer the mother everyone saw as a walking ATM. I was a woman who had recognized her own worth. This change didn't just come from stopping payments. It also stemmed from realizing how they had treated me all these years. They had gotten used to me giving without ever asking for anything in return. They no longer saw me as a family member, but as a financial resource to sustain their lavish lifestyle. The birthday gifts, the phone calls, the dinners, they all had one goal: to keep me in their financial game. Though I felt relieved by cutting off this financial dependency, I also knew that everything would change. Not just my relationship with Michael and Nora, but also my relationship with myself. I had always put my family first, sacrificing myself without ever thinking of my own needs. Now, I decided to live for myself. The next day, I called our family lawyer, James Richardson. We had worked together for 15 years, and I knew he would understand the magnitude of this change in my decision. I didn't just need advice on how to alter my will. I needed to take a stronger step. "James, I need to change the financial agreement in the family," I said firmly. "How can I stop the automatic payments immediately?" There was a long silence on the other end of the phone, and I knew James understood what I was talking about. He knew about the regular payments I had been making for Michael's family, including the house payments, car payments, and even Nora's credit card bills. Everything was structured properly when Robert was alive, but is there something that has changed, Dorothy? James asked, trying to tread carefully. I didn't laugh, but a sense of relief washed over me. "Yes, James, the change is that I no longer want to maintain this financial relationship. I can't keep giving without receiving respect in return." I told him about my frustration over the years, about how Michael and Nora only showed up when they needed money, and how cold they had been toward me. I felt like I had been abandoned. James quickly followed through with my request. By Tuesday afternoon, he informed me that all the automatic payments for Michael's account had been stopped. Payments for loans, housing, cars, and other expenses were no longer going out. I didn't feel the need to explain my decision to them. After all, they had never asked me if I could afford their lavish lifestyle, or ever said, "Thank you, Mom, for helping us." When I stopped the payments, I felt a strange sense of liberation. For the first time in years, I felt like I was in control of my life. I no longer had to worry about whether they would call on holidays or whether they would check in to ask how I was doing. They hadn't done that, and now I didn't have to worry about it anymore. The calls from Michael began immediately. At first, they were short calls, then they grew longer. Each call was filled with urgency and unmasked anxiety. I let the phone ring, not rushing to answer. There were moments when I wondered if they still saw me as a real mother, or just as a financial tool. By letting them call without responding, I wanted to give myself a little time to enjoy this newfound freedom. That day, Michael called 23 times. Nora called 6 times and left 14 messages throughout the day. At first, the messages were strange and full of confusion. "Mom, it seems like there's an issue with your bank account. Can you call us back?" Each subsequent message grew more desperate, followed by official requests. "Mom, the mortgage payment didn't go through and we don't know what to do." I didn't answer. I had done the right thing. By nightfall, Michael called for the 23rd time, and his voice was no longer calm. "Mom, I know you're mad about the birthday, but this isn't a joke anymore. You can't just leave us like this, we need that money." His final words felt like a slap in the face. There was no check-in on my well-being, no words of love, just, "We need money." I turned off my phone and felt an unusual peace. Although I still felt a bit heartbroken, I knew this was the right decision. That feeling, the sense of self-control and taking charge of my life, was unparalleled. I spent the entire night thinking about what had happened and what I would do next. There was still much to resolve, but at least I knew I had made the right decision, not only for myself, but also to teach Michael and Nora a lesson about the value of respect and gratitude. After I severed all financial ties with Michael and Nora, I knew everything would change. However, I couldn't have predicted that this decision would lead to a series of unexpected events. The constant calls and messages from Michael and Nora showed that they really didn't understand the gravity of the situation. But I had made my decision. This time, I wouldn't give in. The next day, I woke up feeling calmer than ever before. I had slept better than I had in many nights, no longer worrying about whether I should cut off the financial support or not. Now, looking back on the decision I made, I knew I had done the right thing. The relationship between me and my family, especially Michael and Nora, was no longer healthy. It had become a relationship built solely on money. As I was enjoying my morning tea, my phone rang. Michael was calling. I knew this was inevitable. He had called non-stop the day before, and now he was at it again. I didn't rush to answer. Instead, I sat there, letting everything be silent, and asked myself if I should continue to tolerate these calls. When the fifth call from Michael came in, I decided to answer. I wasn't angry. I didn't yell. There was just an unusual calmness, completely different from what he expected from me. "Hello, Michael. Do you have something to say?" I could hear the worry in his voice as he responded. "Mom, what's going on with the payments? Why did you stop everything? The family is going through a serious situation." I refused to let myself waver. "Michael, if you want my help, you need to understand that I am not the family's bank. I've been giving for too long without receiving the respect I deserve. You and Nora haven't asked about me once in the past year. You only call when you need money. I can't continue like this anymore." I could hear the desperation in his voice as he tried to explain. "Mom, I'm sorry, we just need money to pay off our loans, and we don't know what to do without your help." I could hear the panic in his voice, but I didn't feel sympathy. I had lived with that sympathy and disrespect for too long, and now it was time to stop. "I understand that you're facing difficulties, Michael, but I can't keep living this way. If you want my help, you and Nora need to prove to me that I matter to you more than just being a financial resource. You need to show me that you care about me as a person, not just as an ATM." For a long time, Michael didn't say anything. The silence spoke volumes. Finally, he sighed and said, "Mom, I understand. I'll do what you asked, but could you help us, at least until we can manage on our own?" I didn't rush to answer. "Michael, I'll give you 30 days. 30 days to prove that you care about me as a person. If in those 30 days I feel real concern from you, I'll reconsider helping financially. But if it's just a show to get the money back, I will never open my heart again." Michael stayed silent. He knew I was serious. We had lived in a false relationship for too long, and now it was time for me to set clear terms. 30 days. I wanted to feel a change in this relationship. Less than 24 hours later, I got the first call from Nora. Her voice sounded fake, unusually sweet. "Hi, Mom. I just wanted to check in on you. How are you feeling? I know things have been tough for you, but I want things to go back to normal." I could feel the forced tone in her voice, but I decided to play along. "Thank you, Nora. I'm fine. It's nice to know you're thinking of me." Nora's fakeness only made me feel more certain that they were trying to get the financial support back that I had cut off. I couldn't help but notice that everything seemed part of a plan. But I decided to stay silent, waiting to see if they would truly change. In the next 3 days, I received more calls and messages from Michael and Nora. For the first time in years, they started paying attention to me. Michael called to ask about my health. Nora sent a long message apologizing and wanting to meet to talk. All of this made me feel an emptiness in my heart. Was this real change, or just an act to get back to my financial support? A week later, I decided I had been patient enough. I needed to clarify everything. One evening, I called James Richardson, the family lawyer, and requested an immediate meeting to sort out all the financial documents and paperwork. I couldn't let them continue to manipulate me. After cutting off all financial support, I told myself I had made the right decision. I was no longer the unconditional mother who gave everything, and I needed to demand the respect I deserved. However, I never expected that this decision would lead Michael and Nora into a perfect act. The calls started, but this time, they weren't desperate financial requests. Instead, they were deliberate performances, full of fake sincerity. We had entered a dangerous game, and I knew I would never be fooled again. Michael, my son, was the first to make a call. His voice was unusually sweet, a stark contrast to his usual tone. "Mom, I just wanted to check on you. I know you might feel hurt, but I really care about your health." His voice sounded sincere, but I couldn't help but notice the fakeness in it. My son had never cared for me like this in all the years before. He only called when he needed money, and now, when the financial source was cut off, suddenly he became the loving son. It was too late for the act. I decided to play along, not rushing to criticize or decline. "Thank you, Michael, I'm fine, but I've been thinking a lot about our relationship. The most important thing is mutual respect and genuine care from you. I don't need fake calls or insincere apologies." I wasn't easily deceived, and I knew full well that these actions weren't a real change, but just an attempt to regain financial control. Nora didn't fall behind. She called me several times, each time asking gently about my health, my work, and even inviting me shopping. It felt like I was part of a play I didn't want to act in. Nora, who had never cared about me except for financial benefits, suddenly became the caring daughter-in-law. I knew this wasn't genuine concern, but rather a game to regain my trust, and more importantly, my money. Each call, each message from them made me feel an indescribable sadness. The sadness wasn't because I was being deceived, but because I realized how naive I had been for so many years. I had believed that love was unconditional sacrifice, but now I realized that love needs respect and acknowledgement. They could no longer take advantage of me as they did before. Although I couldn't help but feel something about their actions, I knew I had to stand firm. I couldn't keep giving without receiving respect in return. This relationship needed to change, and I wouldn't allow it to continue solely based on finances. If Michael and Nora truly cared for me, they would have to prove it through actions, not words. The next day, I called James, the family lawyer, to request an urgent meeting. I couldn't let them continue manipulating me. Everything they had done was just creating a false front to regain control of my finances. I needed to prepare the next steps and ensure that I would never be deceived again. As I continued to feel the insincerity from Michael and Nora, a sense of discomfort welled up inside me. The phone calls with apologies, the gestures of fake concern, all made me feel like a puppet in their hands. And the important thing was that I knew I had made the right decision by cutting off all financial ties. This relationship was no longer just about money. It was about respect, gratitude, and genuine care. They had forgotten these basic values, and I couldn't continue nurturing a relationship that lacked these qualities. In the days that followed, Michael and Nora relentlessly sent texts, made calls, and even sent small gifts. But it was all just desperate attempts to get back to my money. The white flowers, the fake compliments about my health, the calls with dubious concern. Everything was part of a perfect act that I could no longer be fooled by. One day, as I sat drinking tea in my familiar room, I received a call from James, our family lawyer. His voice sounded more serious than usual. "Dorothy, I think we need to talk about what's been going on recently. Michael has contacted me, and there are a few things I need to tell you." I felt a little tense inside, but I knew this was necessary. James had always been someone I trusted for many years, and if he said something was wrong, I knew I had to listen. "James, I don't know what to do anymore," I sighed. "Everything is getting so complicated. I can't keep letting them manipulate me like this." James wasted no time. "Dorothy, I've checked some recent documents, and I found some things you need to know. Michael has contacted a lawyer about protecting your assets, and from what I understand, he's planning to gain control over your finances." My heart sank. I couldn't believe my son had gone this far. "He wants to have me declared incapable of managing my own assets, right?" I asked, my voice filled with disappointment. "Yes," James replied. "And Nora has also been involved in this process. They're trying to create a case against you, making you seem like someone who can't make financial decisions on their own. I don't want to scare you, but they've been working on this since Robert passed away." James's words hit me like a heavy shock. I had no idea they had been planning this for so long, and I hadn't noticed. This was no longer just about forgetting my birthday or the coldness in their calls. This was a plot, a systematic financial manipulation. and they had successfully hidden it all these years. I sat in silence for a while, not knowing how to react. Everything had become clearer than ever. I had been taken advantage of. All the gifts, the apologies, the phone calls were just part of a larger plan to seize control of my assets. I felt angry and betrayed, but at the same time, I also felt a sense of relief. I had finally realized the truth. I took a deep breath and made a decision. James, I want to start a full investigation. I want to know everything about Michael and Nora's finances. I want to know everything they've done since Robert passed away, and I will not let them continue to deceive me. James replied with certainty, I'll get started right away. You will have all the information you need as soon as possible. In the following days, I prepared myself mentally for what was to come. Although I felt anxious and worried, I knew I had done the right thing. I couldn't keep living in an unhealthy relationship. Michael and Nora's actions were not only disrespectful to me, but also an abuse of the trust and love of a mother. A week later, I received a report from an investigator James had hired to look into Michael and Nora's finances. What I discovered made me rethink everything. They had a secret account I didn't know about, where they had been transferring money from the support I had given them and doing things I had never known about. Everything I had helped with over the past 5 years had now become part of a plan to manipulate my assets. When the investigator's report reached my hands, it felt like a hard slap in the face. Everything I once thought was harmless, the times I helped my family, was now twisted and turned into part of a bigger scheme I had no idea about. The truth made my skin crawl. Michael and Nora weren't just exploiting me financially, they were also trying to devise a strategy to take control of all my assets. I looked over the financial reports, the documents the investigator had gathered, and I couldn't believe my eyes. They had acted very deliberately, quietly collecting evidence and information to prove that I was no longer capable of managing my own assets. One of the most shocking discoveries was a bank account I didn't even know existed, where they had been secretly transferring and withdrawing money. All the money I had paid them over the past 5 years, including loans for houses, cars, and even tuition fees, was now just a part of their bigger plan to take over my wealth. This truth hit me hard. I couldn't help but feel betrayed. All the times I thought I was doing the right thing, that I was helping my family, now seemed like a strategy for them to take my assets. I had nurtured them, given them everything a mother could offer, but now I realized they saw me as a tool that could be used whenever they needed. This wasn't the time to feel sorry for myself. I had allowed myself to be exploited for too long, and now I had enough information to take action. I knew I had to do something drastic to protect myself, and that wouldn't just be stopping the financial payments. I needed to stand up and face my family, not just because of the betrayal they caused, but to regain control over my own life. The next day, I decided to call Michael. This was the call I had been waiting for all week, and I knew this would be the turning point. I wanted to make sure they understood that I was no longer someone they could manipulate. I wasn't afraid anymore. I didn't feel lonely or abandoned. Everything was clear, and I wouldn't let myself be controlled any longer. When Michael answered, his voice sounded relieved, as if he thought I would go back to helping them financially. Mom, I know you're upset about the birthday thing, but I just want to say I'm sorry. I want things to go back to how they were. Can we sit down and talk about how to fix everything? I took a deep breath and didn't rush. Michael, I began, my voice steady and calm, we need to talk about what's been happening over the past year, about everything you and Nora have done, and why I can't keep helping you anymore. Michael fell silent for a moment. I could feel the tension in him. Finally he spoke, but his voice wavered. Mom, I know we were wrong, but we can't live without your help. Everything depends on your money. Is that so? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. So if I stop giving you money, what will you do? Will you turn your back on me? Is that what you think of me? Just a never-ending source of money you can rely on without ever having to thank or care for me? Michael went quiet, not answering immediately. I could clearly sense his discomfort. He couldn't deny the truth. Our relationship had ceased to be family. It had become a financial arrangement. "I'm sorry, Mom," Michael finally said. "We were wrong, I know. But you can't just abandon us like this. We won't be able to survive without your help." I didn't respond right away. Everything inside me was slowly rising, a feeling of release and a little pain. "Michael, you and Nora have 30 days. 30 days to prove to me that you care about me as a real mother, not just as a financial provider. In those 30 days, you must show me real change. If not, I will never help you again, and I will change my will, leaving nothing to you." I could hear the change in Michael's voice, a hint of desperation and fear. "Mom, I will do anything to prove we've changed. I promise." I didn't respond. I had made my decision, and I wouldn't change it. After the call with Michael, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. Yes, I had been firm, showing that I was no longer someone they could easily take advantage of. But a part of me still felt conflicted, a little worried. I knew I had done the right thing, but I also understood that this battle had only just begun. Once they realized that I wouldn't be manipulated anymore, would they really change, or would they just find another way to deceive me? The days that followed passed in silence. Michael and Nora didn't call me anymore. Instead, they seemed to accept the challenge I had set, but I couldn't trust that change just because of empty promises. The truth was, I no longer had faith in them. That's why I began preparing for the worst-case scenario, including the possibility that they would continue to deceive me or find ways to cope with the absence of financial support. A week later, I received a call from James, the family lawyer. His voice was low, serious. "Dorothy, I think it's time we need to clarify everything. I have some information I need to share with you." At that moment, I knew things had escalated beyond what I had imagined. "James, what's going on?" I asked, my voice steady, trying to stay calm, though anxiety was rising within me. "Actually, Michael and Nora haven't just stopped contacting you. They've started finding ways to ensure that your financial control won't be affected long-term," James said, his voice confident but also tense. "They've met with another lawyer to try to create a case proving that you're not capable of managing your own assets. This could lead to them requesting a financial competency evaluation." James's words hit me like a shock. Everything I thought was under control suddenly became more complicated and dangerous than ever. They weren't just accepting my changes, they were secretly preparing a plan to gain control over my finances. It was terrifying to think that my own family could go this far. "James, what should I do?" I asked, feeling both worried and resolute. "I've prepared an official financial competency evaluation for you. We'll have experts to defend you and ensure that all your decisions are considered legal and transparent. But I think you should start preparing mentally for what's to come." Once the call ended, I felt a wave of tension wash over me. I had to face this. This wasn't just a fight to protect my assets. It was a fight to protect my freedom and my right to make decisions for myself. Yes, I had given too much without receiving the respect I deserved. And now, I wouldn't let anyone, especially my own family, control my life. I began gathering the necessary legal documents, from wills to financial statements, to ensure I could protect my interests against any intervention from Michael and Nora. Though the feeling of unease still lingered, I knew I was ready to fight. That day, I decided that nothing would shake me. I wouldn't let them manipulate me anymore. I would stand up and defend what I had built, not just because of the money, but for my self-respect, for the love I had given to my family. And most importantly, I would prove to Michael and Nora that a mother's love could never be exploited. That day, I decided I couldn't just sit back and wait to see what they would do next. Although they had sent flowers, written handwritten letters, and tried to show concern, I knew it was all a facade to regain control over my finances. Those fake gestures couldn't fool me. I needed to take action immediately to protect myself and my assets, not just for me, but for the values I've always believed in. The next morning, I called James. James, I want to do something more decisive. I've heard enough lies and theatrics. It's time for me to make everyone understand that I'm not someone who can be manipulated anymore. James listened to me and understood that I had made up my mind to see it through. All right, Dorothy, I'll start the process to set up a financial and psychological competency evaluation for you immediately. If anyone's involved in this, they won't be able to harm your rights. I felt relieved to hear James confirm that everything would be protected and I wouldn't be fooled anymore. Although this move might cause tension in the family, I knew I couldn't continue tolerating this one-sided relationship. Michael and Nora had given me too many reasons not to trust them, and I couldn't overlook the manipulation they had been carrying out. That day, I prepared for the final confrontation. I had arranged to meet Michael and Nora on Friday evening at their house. This time, it wouldn't be a cozy dinner, but an important face-to-face confrontation. I wasn't just going to explain why I cut off their financial support, but I was going to assert my freedom, that I wasn't a financial tool for them. If they wanted change, they would have to prove it with real actions, not empty words. On Friday evening, I arrived at Michael's house. The atmosphere in the house seemed to have already been prepared for this meeting. They had prepared delicious food, beautifully arranged, but I knew it was just a cover-up. Michael stood up to greet me and said, "Mom, I'm so glad you're here. I've been thinking about what you said. I want everything to go back to the way it was. We can start fresh, right?" I looked him in the eye and smiled gently. "Michael, things can't go back to the way they were. What I said is serious. We have to face the truth. It's not empty words or roses that can change everything." Nora stood beside him, also looking uneasy. She opened her mouth, but I cut her off. "Nora, I know you're trying to show concern, but the truth is, I've seen enough. Your actions over the years have shown that you don't care about me, but only come to me when you need money. Not once in the past year have you asked me about my health or my life. You don't see me as a person. You only see me as an ATM." Michael and Nora exchanged glances, seemingly unable to deny it anymore. I could see the worry in their eyes. "Mom, we know we were wrong, but you can't do this. Everything depends on your money," Michael said, his voice trembling. "Well, then I'll let you take care of yourselves," I replied, without hesitation. "I won't help you if you can't treat me like a real mother. You need to learn how to take care of yourselves, live within your means, and if you want to keep this relationship, you have to prove that you respect me, not just call when you need money." I no longer stayed silent. This time, I said everything I had been feeling. They couldn't continue to take advantage of me without facing consequences. "You have 30 days to show me real change. If you continue to deceive me, I won't reopen the financial line. Moreover, I will change my will." Michael and Nora were silent. This was the first time I had seen them truly quiet like this. The calls and messages that once flooded in were now gone. They knew I wasn't someone they could fool anymore. Before leaving their house, I turned back and added one final sentence. "Things won't change unless you truly care about me. I want you to understand that family is not a financial contract, but about love, respect, and genuine concern. If you don't understand that, we can't continue like before." That was the final confrontation. I did what I knew was necessary. I wasn't the easily exploited mother anymore. Now I wait to see if they can change, or if they will simply lose everything I had given them. After the tense confrontation with Michael and Nora, I had no doubts about my decision anymore. While I felt an emptiness when facing the truth that my family had changed, I knew I had done the right thing. I had not only cut off meaningless financial support, but also severed relationships that no longer had respect and real love. Our relationship could never go back to what it once was, and I had made a firm choice. What I asked from them was not unconditional giving, but respect and genuine gratitude. As soon as I stepped out of Michael's house, I felt like a heavy weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I no longer felt the pressure to help them. This freedom did not come easily. but it brought a peace I hadn't felt in many years. It was the feeling of someone who had finally recognized their self-worth, someone who was no longer allowing the selfishness and greed of others to control their life. In the days that followed, I did not receive any more calls or messages from Michael and Nora. They no longer reached out to me as before, and perhaps they realized that I was serious. This silence brought me a strange sense of peace, but it also made me wonder whether they would truly change or if they were just waiting for an opportunity to revert to their old ways. I began to continue my life with new routines. I spent more time on myself, engaging in activities I enjoyed, such as reading, walking in the park, and even rediscovering hobbies I had forgotten over the years. I had forgotten that my life wasn't just about taking care of others. Now, I had the time to focus on myself. One day, I received a call from James. "Dorothy, I have some important news for you. Michael has contacted me and wants to meet you. He says he has realized his mistakes and wants to apologize for everything." James's words surprised me. Although I had mentally prepared for them to try to come back to me, I didn't expect Michael to be the one to Judong apologize. "James, I'll meet Michael, but not to forgive him right away. I need to see if he has truly changed, or if he's just trying to restore what he lost," I replied, my voice firm. The next day, Michael came to meet me at my apartment. When he walked in, I could clearly see the worry in his eyes. Michael was no longer as confident as before, and his anxiety was something I couldn't ignore. "Mom, I know I've wronged you. I'm sorry for everything. I realize now that you are not someone who gives unconditionally. I treated you like an ATM, and I'm really sorry for treating you that way." I looked at him for a long moment, sensing the sincerity in Michael's voice, but I knew that an apology couldn't change everything immediately. "Michael, I don't forgive easily, but I need you to understand that true change has to come from actions, not just words. You can apologize, but to make me feel the change, you'll have to prove it through actions. Show me that you truly care about me as a person, not just as a source of money for your family." Michael lowered his head, perhaps for the first time feeling the seriousness from me. "I understand now, Mom. I'll show you my change. I want our relationship to return, and I'll do everything to fix my mistakes." I looked at him, not sure whether this promise came from his heart or was just empty words. But I knew I couldn't continue living in a relationship without respect and gratitude. If Michael and Nora truly wanted to change, I would give them the opportunity. But this time, I wouldn't forgive easily without concrete actions that proved they truly understood and valued me. My decision was not just about cutting off financial support. It was about not being able to continue living in a relationship based solely on material gain. If Michael and Nora truly loved me, they would have to prove it through real actions. Otherwise, I would continue on my path, living freely and no longer being exploited. This was the first step in rebuilding my relationship with my family. But I also understood that big changes couldn't happen overnight. There was still a lot to be done, but I had the strength to face them. In the weeks following my confrontation with Michael, I began to realize that this journey was not going to be an easy one. Michael and Nora seemed to have started truly reflecting on what I had said, but not everything went as I had hoped. While they made attempts to change, their small actions were not enough to make me feel that they had truly learned their lesson. Apologies were not enough. Every word needed to be backed up by action, and I began to understand that this process was not going to end as easily as I had thought. Michael started calling more often, checking in on my health, inviting me to dinner. He even began sharing stories about his life and his worries about the future. However, I couldn't help but notice a significant difference between trying to change for one's own benefit and truly wanting to do so for the sake of others. These calls, while they seemed caring, still felt deeply insincere. For the first time in my life, I couldn't trust these calls. Nora also showed some change, but it was more strategic than emotional. She began spending more time with me, but most of our conversations still revolved around luxury items, shopping, and travel. She appeared eager to reconnect with me, but I could clearly sense that she had not truly changed. Our relationship seemed to be maintained on the foundation of money, and I could no longer accept that. With all of this, I realized I couldn't continue living in a relationship based on superficiality and shallow performances. Even though Michael and Nora might change with a few small actions, I understood that the relationship had been broken beyond repair. I had given too much time, emotion, and money to them, but I could no longer live that way. I needed to protect myself and teach them one final lesson about the value of respect, gratitude, and responsibility. One morning, after receiving an expensive gift from Nora and a long call from Michael, I sat down and made a decision. I needed to have one more face-to-face conversation, not just to demand they change, but to assert that I would no longer provide for them if they did not truly respect me, and I would not allow them to continue deceiving me in these power games. The next day, I called Michael and Nora over to my house. This time, I wouldn't let them escape the conversation. "We need to have a real talk about this relationship," I began, my voice firm and serious. "You guys haven't understood what true change means. The calls, the gifts, all of this is just temporary attempts to regain control of my finances. What I need is respect, genuine care from you." Nora tried to speak, but I cut her off. "Nora, I don't want to hear any more apologies. I've heard enough. You need to understand that I will not continue living in a relationship based solely on financial gain. If you love me, you'll have to act in a way that shows me you truly care about me, not just when you need money." Michael and Nora looked at each other, and then finally Michael sighed. "Mom, we understand. We'll change, but we need more time. We'll do everything we can to show that we love you and respect you." This time, I couldn't trust their promises anymore. I had been deceived too many times by empty words. However, I knew that this confrontation would be the final step in ending everything. I had taught them an important lesson, and whether they changed or not, I had made myself stronger. My life was no longer bound by unhealthy relationships. I had learned that respecting myself and demanding respect from others was the most important thing. Family relationships can be built on love, but without respect and recognition, they are just a game of interests. And I no longer wanted to play that game. Since the last confrontation with Michael and Nora, I felt like one door had closed, but another one opened before me. For the first time in many years, I no longer felt forced or exploited. I took control of my life and decided that nothing was more important than protecting myself and the values I've always believed in. I no longer worried about whether my family would come back to me for money. Everything is different now. My relationship with my children is no longer the same, but I realize I need to continue on my own path. Despite the struggles in my family, I must live for myself. I had spent too much time and energy on people who didn't truly care about me as a person. Now I know it's time to focus on more important things. In the weeks that followed, I didn't receive any calls or messages from Michael and Nora. While I didn't feel joy in the silence, I understood that this was the result I needed. I had done everything I could to show them the value of true respect and love. And now, when nothing had changed, I knew I couldn't continue living in a relationship that lacked sincerity and respect. I began to take new steps in my life. Although I'm not one to change easily, I realized that sometimes we need to cut off old relationships to make way for new opportunities. I spent more time for myself, rediscovering hobbies I had neglected for years. I returned to the interests I had forgotten, like painting, writing, and taking yoga classes that I once loved but had abandoned because of my focus on caring for the family. During this process, I also regained my confidence. No longer the mother who sacrificed without getting anything in return, I learned that love cannot be exploited. I was no longer just a mother providing money, but a woman with control over my own life, the power to decide when and to whom I give my attention, and the right to demand respect. Life started to change in ways I hadn't imagined. I had more friends, people who truly cared about me and didn't exploit me for money. I traveled, met new people, and joined positive communities where I could mingle and share joy with like-minded individuals. Honest conversations, relaxing coffee dates, and explorative trips made me realize that life outside the family can also be filled with love and joy. One day, I decided to host a small party at home and invite close friends over. I didn't need to do this to prove anything to anyone, but because I deserved to enjoy happy moments without worrying about financial burdens or feeling exploited. That was when I realized I had regained full control. I no longer had to rely on anyone to feel important. I had learned that respect and love must start with myself. The next day, I received an unexpected call from Michael. I didn't know if he was being sincere or just trying to manipulate my emotions once again, but I decided that this time, I wouldn't rush to respond. I wanted him to understand that change can't come from mere apologies, but from genuine actions. I had taken control of my life, and I wasn't afraid to stand firm in the face of any challenge. My life now isn't just about cutting off financial support or ending old relationships. It's a journey of rediscovering myself, creating a life I truly deserve, one where I am loved and respected. And I know I'm ready for a new chapter in my life, not depending on anyone, but relying on myself.